Every single hospital that we had gone into was overcrowded, it was understaffed, and the only equipment that we saw was quite literally in what nurses call the equipment graveyard. We have always been structured as an impact-driven for-profit, so we are a public benefit corporation, which does mean that I'm legally allowed to make decisions based on the impact of the organization as well as fiduciary duty. They're allocating their budget to products that are truly needed on the ground. And that's created a deeper sense of ownership, both for us as a company and for the hospital.
Welcome to The Growth Switch, the podcast where we explore the strategies, struggles, and breakthroughs of bold business leaders. I'm your host, Jules Fox, growth strategist and lead content creator at Aries Media. I'm here to uncover how today's top brands are scaling, overcoming challenges, and unlocking sustainable success. Now, for those of you just tuning in, Aries Media helps grow successful brands with comprehensive, hands-on support for sales, business development, and performance marketing. Go ahead and drop growth into the comments if you want to learn how to do that. Now, today, real treat, we have Sona Shah on the podcast. She's the CEO and co-founder of Neopenda. It's a MedTech innovation company that's transforming global health by designing scalable medical technologies like the NeoGuard vital signs monitor for low resource settings across the world, but primarily focused at the moment in Africa, basically in places where they are needed most. Sona, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me. It's an honor to be here.
Pleasure to have you on the podcast. So, all right, I think I view you, and other people would view you, as a person who is generating a lot of impact. You've got a successful company, and a lot of us are just wondering, like, what's that journey like? Where did you start from, and what got you into what you do today?
Yeah, I've come to realize that it's never really a linear pathway. And that's the most exciting part, is that we all come from diverse backgrounds. So happy to share mine. I started as a chemical engineer, went to Georgia Tech for undergrad and graduated a semester early. So I decided that I didn't want to spend that semester starting to work immediately. So I went to Western Kenya, and I was a primary school teacher out there. Really nothing to do with engineering, but I loved it. It was beautiful. It was warm. The people were incredible, but it was a totally different lifestyle than everything I had grown up with. I didn't have running water. I didn't have electricity. And so just really being exposed to how a lot of the world lives, different life without expectations beyond the basic necessities to live. So a lot of that really stuck with me. But while I was there, I was exposed to a number of inequities that I was fortunate not to have growing up. And when I came back to the US, I started working in pharma. Again, totally different world. I was in bioprocess research and development. So really doing a lot more on the engineering and the healthcare side. All the medications that we were creating were going through clinical trials. And so I really loved that side of it. I loved the engineering. I loved the healthcare product process development, understanding a lot more about what it actually takes to go from ideation all the way through commercialization. Which of course doesn't happen overnight, and certainly not in the healthcare space. And so I took a lot of those lessons, but I kept thinking the kids that I taught in Kenya may never see the medications that I was helping make. And that's really the inequity that drove me back to graduate school to figure out, how can we provide equitable access to healthcare around the world? I didn't really know what I wanted to do with that. And I don't think I realized until fairly recently that I was bit by the entrepreneurial bug through influence from my dad. He started his own company before I was even born. So it's an environmental consulting company. And I think just being around that instilled this sense of leadership and this can-do attitude of just figuring out how to make mountains move. And that's really what inspired me to go back to graduate school and figure out just how do we provide this equitable access to healthcare around the world. Yeah. So I went to Columbia University, went there for my master's in biomedical engineering, and was super fortunate to meet my now co-founder, Tess. And we started exploring, why is newborn mortality so much higher in low and middle income countries than here in the US? And there truly are about 1,000 problems that contribute to this, but tinkering in our lab in New York wasn't going to solve any of them. So we entered the venture competition, got funding from the university, and used that to go out to Uganda. And I was just astonished. Every single hospital that we had gone into was overcrowded. It was understaffed. And the only equipment that we saw was quite literally in what nurses call the equipment graveyard. And it's probably exactly what you're thinking right now. It's a mound or field full of broken medical equipment, because devices are not designed for the constraints of 85% of the world's population. And because of that, we created Neopenda to design MedTech that functions anywhere in the world. And I think as engineers, we see 100 problems and want to solve them all immediately, but you have to start somewhere. And so in these really overcrowded, understaffed wards, we thought, how can we help alert these nurses when a patient was actually in distress. And that's really what led to the creation of our first product called NeoGuard. So this is our wearable vital signs monitor that helps alert clinicians of patients in distress. We are now commercially available across Kenya, Uganda, and Ghana, and starting to expand our reach. But that's my journey.
Yeah, I mean, hey, that's you were so succinct, but that's really a very expansive journey. And when you look at it in the broad picture, like, my thoughts of like where you're headed, it also feels like just like this is really kind of just the first step. I really feel like this could easily grow to be a worldwide movement.
Yeah, that's exactly how we're envisioning it. It's not the MedTech in Africa is a very nascent field, especially when we started 10 years ago. MedTech in Africa wasn't really a thing. Nobody's really thinking about the African continent in terms of opportunity. A lot of people often view Africa as one country that's really poor. And that's something that we fight really hard against because it's not. It's 54 diverse, unique countries that exist across the continent with that is ripe and rich with opportunity. In Kenya alone, there are 13,000 health facilities, and these health facilities are all looking for, demanding for products that actually are designed with and for them. So for us, this is the starting point. We spent the first 6 years in R&D on our first product, really not just for the first product, but really to create an infrastructure that allows us to replicate this for future products as well. And so we've really been quite proud of the way that we're paving the landscape and shaping how medtech is viewed on the African continent and in emerging markets globally.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. When you do start getting more granular, right? When you do throw out the concept of, oh, Africa is just this one place. Well, it's so many different and unique, diverse places. You also realize that, designing medtech for these particular countries that you're working with is different than just in the US. And again, the US is a pretty big place too, to generalize, but our healthcare systems are pretty good. And in some of the places in which you're thinking of putting some of these healthcare devices, there may be power outages or limited internet or even minimal training for some of the people. So how does NeoGuard help to solve some of those issues?
Yeah, that's exactly why we are doing what we do, is because we're designing from the ground up for those lowest levels of infrastructure. For vital signs monitoring has been around for decades. That's not something that we invented. What we did do is reimagine it for the constraints in emerging markets where those power outages are so frequent. Most devices, I think 70% of medical equipment sits idle in African health facilities, and it's for those reasons. It's because there's power instability or dust gets into the equipment and fries it, or there's unreliable supply chains. I once had a nurse tell me that a fully functional incubator for her patient was just sitting idle because the instruction manual was in German. So, how can anyone possibly, and she doesn't speak German, so how can you actually use the devices if you don't have the infrastructure around training, installation, maintenance, and all of these other pieces that make equipment actually function? So, with our wearable device, when you think patient monitor, you probably are envisioning what's in a hospital setting. It's your big, bulky patient monitors that's right next to a patient's bedside. Our device is a wearable device that's worn on a patient's forehead, and it's entirely reusable. So you can just wipe it down with alcohol. You recharge the battery, so it lasts for 36 hours without having to recharge it. And then there's a micro USB, takes less than 2 hours to recharge it. And then it's ready for reuse on the next patient. So we really are functioning in environments where there isn't necessarily a ton of infrastructure, where the training may not be sufficient for large pieces of equipment that take a ton of time to actually learn how to use it. We don't just put our devices in the hospitals. Our job is not done once we sell the product to the hospital. Our job is done when we see successful usage of product and we get the feedback that can help inform both existing product and future products to come. So all of our products are driven directly from the users and understanding what problems they are facing. And we leverage technology to help solve them.
Yeah, and any good startup is focused on solving a problem. And it sounds like there's no shortage of problems in which you can step in and begin to solve each of those one by one.
Yeah, I think the bigger problem is actually that there are too many opportunities. I think it's and that's the phase that we're in right now, is we're transitioning to scale. But scale for us could mean geographic expansion, not just across the African continent, but globally, India, Southeast Asia, Latin America, Middle East. It could mean new products in our pipeline. It could mean bringing on other people's products, because now now we know actually how to commercialize and get into the hospitals that need it in a sustainable way. It could mean expansion of our existing product into pediatric and adult patient populations or primary care remote patient monitoring. So the opportunities are endless. The bigger challenge is which ones do we pursue next?
Or yeah, absolutely. One of the places that my mind went to also is, some of these like civil wars that we see in countries, or these wars between people. And I don't mean just for the soldiers. I mean, like, sometimes the civilians end up getting involved in there too, and there's just the infrastructure goes down, and there's just critical moments to save human lives.
Yeah, wars, disaster relief, refugee settlements. There's so many different areas where I think a vital signs monitor is essential, and especially in places where you need the ability to triage. And so that's really one of the next steps for us is we're primarily working in inpatient monitoring where your patients are already critically ill. We know that that's why they're in the hospital. That's why they're staying there. But we've gotten customer feedback that what about primary healthcare? We're overcrowding our hospitals, oftentimes with patients that don't actually need to be there. What if we can help triage at earlier stages and primary levels of care so that we get patients into the hospital faster when they need to be there and they don't come to the hospitals if they don't need to be there, if they can recover from home? And that really addresses some of the things that you had mentioned around wars, but also disaster relief and refugee settlements. How do we kind of identify the patients that really do need care so that we can move more into preventative action as opposed to just being reactive? And how do we keep patients at home that can just recover from home until their condition worsens or something happens where they do need to go in?
Yeah, absolutely. Now, from hearing what you do and the impact that you make on the world, and that your heart is clearly in the right place, I think a lot of people might assume that Neopenda is a nonprofit company. But what's the decision to build Neopenda as a for-profit venture? Like, how do you balance that impact and sustainability with making sure that you can keep the lights on, keep the doors open?
I think that's absolutely paramount to the company itself. We have always been structured as an impact driven for profit. So we are a public benefit corporation, which does mean that I'm legally allowed to make decisions based on the impact of the organization as well as fiduciary duty. That's super critical to the success of our company because the more devices we sell, the more patients we can improve quality of care for, and the more profitable we can be. It's a win-win. There's no reason why we need to be compromising patient impact for profitability or vice versa. That really does go hand in hand for us. The way that we do that is different though. It's when you think of MedTech, most people think of US markets or high income countries where you can sell at such a high profit margin. We're not actually compromising on profit margins. We're still making 50 to 60% profit margins on every sale. The difference is that we have created a product that is much more affordable for the communities that we're operating in. So we're a tenth of the cost of comparable equipment on the market with our patient monitor, but we're still operating with the same margins as you can expect with any med tech company. And with that philosophy in mind, that profitability is really what drives our growth because we're thinking both in terms of how do we scale this into a business that can replicate it for future products, replicate it in future geographies, thinking about it with the big principles that are necessary with a profitable, sustainable organization. But at the core of the company, we were created for impact. And so that we're not wavering on the impact and the opportunity that we have to really save patient lives. So because both of those have just been built into the core of the company, that's never really been a compromise on our end.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And, as far as compromise is concerned, we're seeing a lot of interesting and unique challenges being brought to the US markets and US companies, especially with how we interact with places abroad. US aid reform is shifting, global health funding. So how do you navigate some of those challenges in aid disruption while still staying true to your mission?
Yeah, look, I think with all the USAID stuff, this has been an extraordinarily challenging year for politics. It's certainly had a huge impact on our organization given the work that we do abroad. That being said, I think a lot of hospitals that are operating in African countries needed reform. We needed to change the status quo, the way that was normally operating. And what I mean by that is Hospitals are often told what they need. That's never a good way. That's never the right decision to make, is to tell somebody what they need. We need to be listening to these hospitals. We need to be understanding what they actually need and then building something alongside them. And that's exactly what we've done. So when we're talking about USAID and a lot of the shifts, the traditional mechanism of getting medical equipment is through donations, but that's exactly why the equipment graveyard exists. It's because donations are given to hospitals. There's no ownership over the products, and the products are not designed with and for them. And so, yes, there's been a significant amount of disruption, and my heart goes for all of the organizations that have lost USAID funding. We were late stage diligence for a USAID grant as well. And so there's certainly direct impact that it has on the organization, but we've shielded ourselves from that because we've created demand from the ground up. We've been working directly with the hospitals that have told us what product they need, what problems they're having. We created a product that solves those problems. And now we're in more than 50 hospitals that have directly purchased devices from us with the limited resources that they have. So they're allocating their budget to products that are truly needed on the ground. And that's created a deeper sense of ownership, both for us as a company and for the hospital. It's just much more sustainable. Reform was needed. The way that it was done, I don't personally agree with, but I do think that the company itself has been shielded because of the way that we've approached our markets.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that's the smartest way to go about it, honestly, is just be self-reliant, And on that note, you've talked about you're raising a community investment round, and that you mentioned that you have a WeFunder campaign where you could benefit from both investments and from people's expertise. So on those two different notes, how can people find that WeFunder campaign and connect with you? And then if people do want to offer their expertise, how can they connect with you best to give you that as well?
Yeah. So we're really excited to be raising from the community. What that actually means is that anybody anywhere in the world can invest in the company for as little as $100. You can go to wefunder.com/Neopenda and access all of our campaign information. You can see a little bit more deep dive into the company, who we are as an organization, how we're making money, and what it looks like to it is an investment. You are giving us your money not as a donation, but as an investment. And alongside that does come the expertise. And we realize that as we transition to scale and we grow our organization, it's not just capital that we need, it's expertise. And that ranges in a variety of ways. There are only a handful of organizations, people that are doing MedTech on the African continent, which means my job is to take that expertise and translate it into the work that we're doing. Back office stuff around accounting, legal, HR, operational things that often kill companies. That's what we're looking for expertise in. We want to pick your brain no matter what industry it's in. We want people that know how to scale MedTech across multiple geographies, how to sell to governments and how to sell to WHO and UNICEF and the larger multilaterals. There's just a whole host of expertise that all of you as individuals can provide, and we are looking to tap into that. We want you to be part of our journey, part of our story, because that's how we can do well and do good at the exact same time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So, you have this element of there are people who believe in you, there are people who believe in the mission, and rightfully so. That's fantastic. And they can help with some funding stuff. Outside of those investors, do you have growth plans or growth goals for the company itself, as far as like how many more hospitals you can reach, who you can pitch the products to, and how you can grow internally as well?
Yeah. That's a great question. I think internally, what we're looking at is over the next year, we'd like to get to $1 million in run rate. That's a traditional metric that a lot of VCs, investors are looking for. But beyond, the traditional metrics that other people are looking for, what that proves to us is that we have a clear path to profitability and we have the ability to actually start scaling what we're doing. As we do that, we're in that transition to scale phase where we are focusing on setting up all of our operations, setting up our HR systems to grow from a 10-person company to a 100-person company. Certainly not over the next year, but over the next several years, and really start building a more robust organization on the R&D side, sales, business development, recruitment, et cetera. So what we are looking for over the next year is introductions to other organizations that might be able to leverage our technology in the hospitals that they're supporting, the hospitals that they're engaging with. We are looking for new talent as we continue to grow this round. We're looking for expertise. There's no shortage of talent around the world. What we're looking for are people who know how to operate within a small startup ecosystem and grow from 10 to 100 people. Again, that's on the operational side, that's on the sales and the business development side, that's on R&D. And so we're really excited to now be transitioning into that phase where we can't do this as a 10-person company. We need more people. And to do that, we need, one, the funding to support with that, and two, the talent that can enable us to actually grow your expertise. My philosophy is always to hire smarter. We hire you for a role, and I want you to outsmart the rest of the team every step of the way, because you would be a lead in our role at an organization. And so that's been a really exciting thought process of just who do we want those next hires to be and how can we take that growth to the next level. So, where we stand right now at 50 hospitals, that's great. That's thousands of patients that are actively using our product and that we're improving quality of care for, but it's not enough. How do we do this better? How do we do it faster so that we can get to 1,000 hospitals and not just in 3 geographies? How do we start scaling across the African continent and into other geographies globally?
Yeah, it's a great question. And, the answer is wrapped up in how are we going to execute on these things that we're already doing, to the absolute best of our ability. And I can see that your passion really shines through for the impact that you're making here for helping these people out to live better lives, save their lives potentially. That is a very honorable mission.
Thanks. Yeah, I think what's equally important to us is really acknowledging the market opportunity that does exist. The impact is certainly why we do what we do. It makes the really hard days a lot easier knowing that we're waking up every morning, and it gives us a different sense of urgency. These patients deserve to have high quality access to care no matter where they are born, and they don't right now. And so it gives us this sense of urgency. But I think the other part of it is really understanding that the market opportunity is just so rich and people are overlooking it. People aren't realizing the opportunity that exists right in front of themselves. And when they do, we're going to be at the very front of that. We're already paving the way for other medical device companies. I would love to be run out of a job. If there are many more companies that are creating MedTech, I don't see that happening anytime soon, but it has been nice to see that shift in other startups starting to think about the African continent as opportunity. And that's both, again, in terms of impact and market.
Yeah. Super smart stuff and absolutely correct. For companies who are willing to look past the low hanging fruit of like, this is how we've always done business in the US with MedTech because that's how it's done, to actually there's a ton of business opportunities out there in the rest of the world, especially where a third of the world's population is living,
Yep, exactly. Yeah, it baffles me that we haven't yet figured out how to design MedTech for 85% of the world. Why haven't we done that yet?
Yeah, it's a good question. No, thank you so much for joining the podcast. I really appreciate your expertise and your time. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.